And God said, "Let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them." And he took more than 1,000,000 Israelites out into the wilderness to show them the way of salvation. And he asked them to construct them a place where he could live among all of them, right in the middle. As he gave the instructions, we can see in Exodus chapter 27 the instructions for the outer court of this tabernacle. And we're looking particularly right now at the Bible study on the altar of sacrifice. "And thou shalt make an altar of shittim wood, 5 cubits long, 5 cubits broad. An altar shall be 4 square, and the height thereof shall be 3 cubits. A cubit is the length of a man's elbow to his fingertips." And as you put yours against someone else's, you'll realize there's quite a difference in the length. The average, some have said, is 21 inches. But as you can see, it is not the same as inches. That is an exact universal measurement. As we continue on in verse 2 of Exodus 27, "Thou shalt make the horns of it on the 4 corners thereof. His horns shall be the same." So here are the horns. And in the Bible, the symbol of horn is for power. Jesus has the power to save us from sins. "His horn shall be of the same, and thou shalt overlay it with brass or bronze. And thou shalt make his pans to serve, receive the ashes." So there were like kettles and pots and pans used in this service. "Thou shalt make his pans to receive his ashes, and his shovels, and his basins, and his flesh hooks, and his fire pans. All the vessels thereof shall be made of the same material, bronze or brass." There's a symbol, and we talked about the color symbol in the last lesson. Brass represented Jesus taking our sin on himself. How fitting then, at the altar of sacrifice, which represents Jesus dying on the cross, that we should have the symbol of our sin being taken on him. That's the bronze color. "And thou shalt make a grate of network of brass." So on the top there was a grating so the sacrifice didn't fall through, only the ashes fell through, and then they had something at the bottom to catch it. It's all written there in Exodus 27. "And thou shalt put it underneath to catch the ashes. And thou shalt make staves." Right here is the connector for putting the sticks or staves for carrying and porting this on their shoulders. It was not a stable thing in a big building. Whenever they moved from place to place, they had to port these items. Some items, like the curtains, the pillars and things, could go on a cart drawn by oxen, but the ones that had the carrying poles were to be ported on the shoulders, showing respect for the symbol in a special way. "And thou shalt," verse 7, "and the staves shall be put into the rings, and the staves shall be upon the 2 sides of the altar to bear it." So they had to carry it similar to how they carried the ark. "And the boards, they were hollow, and it was shown in the mount when Moses was up in the mountain with God. All these things were shown." The court of the tabernacle was surrounded by a white curtain. I want to speak a little more about the altar of sacrifice. They had a covering of purple. This covering of purple was to be on it when they moved it from place to place. They had different sacrifices, a lamb, a bullock. They had different sacrifices, so the topping of this was strong enough to hold the large creatures. And as we see this, they would do the morning and evening sacrifices. They would put salt on the sacrifice. What in the world was salt for? What did they do salt for? Why did they have to put salt on that. What does the salt represent? Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. And it is love. There's a story of a woman who had a husband who was very, very beautiful, very handsome, and very nice and noble. And he began to drink alcohol. As he was drinking the alcohol, it changed how nice he was. He would come home at 2 a.m. He would beat on his wife and say, get up and make me some food. I want some food now. And she would smile and fix her hair, put on a really nice dress, and go and make the most delicious food for him. Then she would call him, and he would sit down and eat like he was eating a banquet. She could have just taken the dishes and thrown the food on the table and said, there you go, now I'm going back to sleep. But she was so respectful to her husband, who used to be noble and very good looking. Day after day this happened. He would come home, beat on her, and she would get up 2 o'clock in the morning. She would get up, wake up, and fix her hair and smile and sing while she's fixing this wonderful food for him. As she continued this, one day he brought a buddy home from the bar where they were drinking, and the buddy couldn't stand how sweet and nice she was in response to how her husband was treating her. So he got up and left. He did not wait for the food. She just continued on making the most delicious things, and all of a sudden, as she went in to ask him to eat with her, she found him crying. What? What is happening? Why are you crying? She said. And he said, why are you so good to me when I am so cruel to you? And she said, because I love you. And he said, I want what you have. How can you be so nice when I'm so cruel? Call the pastor. I want to be baptized. She says, I just want to go to heaven, and I really wanted you to go there, but you are doing all these terrible things, so I know you're not going there, and I just wanted to make this place as much of a heaven as possible. Just as much as wonderful heaven, because that's all you're going to get. He said, call the pastor quick. I'm going to change. I'm never going to drink alcohol again, and I'm going to go to church with you. How did all this come about? How? By the salt. Jesus says, you are the salt. If you have love in your heart, you can break down Satan's barriers. If you have love in your heart, you can win many people to Jesus. Love is like a weapon. It is coming from your heart, which comes from heaven, and that is the salt. The sacrifice is important. Giving your life for someone, doing wonderful things is important. But the salt, the love in your heart, is what makes the difference. And that is what is coming from heaven. Only by heaven's feeding the stream of your character can you come up with this kind of love. It's not a natural thing when you're beaten and you're hated and you're told terrible things to respond with a smile and respect and love for that person. It's not an easy thing, but Jesus did it, and we can do it. He will make it possible. There's power. There's power in the blood of Jesus. There's power from heaven to help you be the loving person. The altar of sacrifice is actually an example, a symbol that Jesus, at that point, he would come, and now he already has come, and he would die on the cross. That would be the most amazing sacrifice. How could anybody love us so much that he would come from the most beautiful place of heaven, where all the angels adored him, all the angels loved him, and whatever he said, they quickly did it. They showed him honor, and he comes here on this earth. They beat on him, they pull his hair out, they shout and say, you're from the devil, and you cast out demons by Satan. How did Jesus have so much love for us when we treated him so mean? So in the outer court of the tabernacle, we have looked at the first thing that is just inside the gate of red, blue, and purple. And this thing represents Jesus and his sacrifice for us. How can we become more like Jesus? How can we have this kind of love? That will be our next lesson as we study what can we do to be more like Jesus. Thank you for watching Follow the Lamb seminar. Continue on watching as we study more lessons in the tabernacle.